I gotta say something about this, bro. Dwayne Wade, you gone too fucking far, dog. That is a male, a 12-year-old. At 12, they don't even know what their next meal gonna be. They don't have it figured out yet. He might meet a woman, anything at 16, and fall in love with her. But his be gone. How you gon' like, bro? You going too far, dog. Don't cut his off, bro. Like, bro, for real. If he gonna be gay, let him be gay. But don't cut his off, bro.
Breaking news, the courtroom exploded in shock today, and not a soul in that building was ready for what went down. The Harris family, once sitting pretty at the top of the industry, looking untouchable and polished, is now dangling by a thread, on the brink of complete destruction. And the one who lit the match? None other than Boosie.
People hit me up like, King, I know you tired. You ain't get no sleep. And the truth be told, before this little I ain't been getting no sleep. You know what I'm saying? I just been outside working, lifestyle. You know, lifestyle just lifing. You know what I'm saying? And, but now I'm damn sure not getting no sleep. This up every morning, and then around the morning time, he like to do that little live concert I be doing with him. And, he like to walk around the house. So,
strutting into court with what he called the ultimate smoking gun against King Harris. Picture this. Silence so sharp, you could slice it open. The judge pounding the gavel trying to keep order, and then, bam! Boosie's lawyer slams a thick file onto the table like a hammer hitting steel. Gasps rippled through the entire courtroom as his voice boomed out. These are the texts the Harris family never wanted the world to see. And then it happened. Lights dim, projector on, and the screen lit up. At first, just blurry images, but within seconds, everyone knew exactly what they were looking at. Private, raw, and damning screenshots from King Harris's own conversations. The words on the screen stabbed like knives, messages King himself allegedly typed with his own fingers. One line stood out, freezing every breath in the room. Dad doesn't know. If they find out the truth about me and the parties, it's over. You could literally feel the air vanish. Time. I sat there drenched in sweat, his hands trembling like he was gripping onto his entire empire slipping away. King's eyes welled up with tears, his whole world flashing before him, while Boosie just leaned back, soaking in the chaos he had unleashed like a bomb in the middle of Atlanta's royal family. Boosie leaned back in his chair with that cold, mocking smirk that sent chills across the room, like he already knew he had the Harris empire dangling by a thread. The air was so thick, even veteran reporters who've seen it all were whispering, "This is the end of the Harris dynasty." But the nightmare didn't stop there. It went darker, way darker, because right after those texts, another bomb dropped. Voice notes, chilling recordings of King Harris himself, admitting he was set up, caught in twisted late-night parties that were allegedly orchestrated by Boosie's own son. The shock was unreal. What started as whispers turned into screams across the courtroom. It didn't take long for the media to slap a label on it. The dark secret of King Harris. Within minutes, the internet was on fire. Hashtags lit up every timeline. Hashtag King Secret exposed. Hashtag Boosie wins. Hashtag Harris family destroyed. The scandal wasn't just messy. It was catastrophic. This wasn't just another family feud. This was betrayal in its rawest form. A tragedy so public, it felt like the collapse of a whole legacy, playing out like a live soap opera in front of millions. And then, silence. The entire courtroom froze as every eye locked on Boosie. He slammed his phone down on the judge's desk with a crack that echoed through the chamber. His voice trembled with rage, but his words sliced through the air like blades. "You wanted the truth? You think you know King Harris? Nah, you don't know nothing. Let me show you what he's been hiding." The energy was electric. This wasn't just evidence. This was war, and Boosie came ready to burn it all down. Gasps ripped through the courtroom so loud it sounded like a wave crashing against stone. Even the lawyers froze in place, their mouths half open, papers slipping from their hands. The judge leaned forward, his gavel stuck midair, torn between banging it down to end the madness or letting the chaos consume the room. And then, one swipe changed everything. The projector screen lit up, revealing a series of leaked text messages no one on Earth was supposed to see. The very first words hit like a sledgehammer, sending shockwaves through every corner of the courtroom. The messages were between King Harris and a shadowy, unidentified contact. Messages that revealed secrets so disturbing, so twisted, that people in the gallery literally clutched their chests in shock. Some shook their heads in denial. Others whispered under their breath, "No, no, this can't be real." But it was real. Deadly real. The timestamps, the slang, the tone, it all pointed to one terrifying truth. King Harris had been living a double life. Boosie's voice cracked like thunder as he snatched the words off the screen and read them aloud. He wasn't just exposing King Harris. He was ripping apart the polished royal image the Harris family had spent decades building. His roar filled the courtroom. "You lied to your fans. You lied to your father. You lied to the world. But these texts, these don't lie." The words echoed, bouncing off the walls like gunshots. All eyes darted back to King Harris, and that's when the transformation hit. The cocky, arrogant kid that the internet thought they knew had vanished. His face turned ghost white, drained of all bravado. His hands fidgeted, his knees bounced under the table, and the fear, raw, unfiltered fear, took over his entire body. His lawyers leaned in, frantically whispering desperate strategies into his ear, but he wasn't hearing a word. He knew what the rest of the world was realizing in real time. The walls were closing in, and there was no way out. The mask King Harris had worn for so long, perfectly polished, carefully crafted, was smashed to pieces right there in front of the world. These texts weren't just humiliating, they were catastrophic. They exposed betrayals nobody saw coming, hidden battles he kept buried, and a desperation so raw it left the courtroom trembling. Phrases like, "I can't keep this hidden anymore," and "if they find out, it's over for me," painted a haunting picture of a young man spiraling deep into a shadowy world, far darker than anyone ever imagined. Fans sitting in the back row couldn't even hold back their tears. This wasn't just gossip, it was heartbreak in motion. They weren't witnessing some random celebrity scandal. They were watching a legacy heir collapse in real time. The boy once held high beside his superstar father was now crumbling, his empire slipping through his fingers while the cameras caught every second of it. But then, the part that froze every single breath in the room, the confessions. Buried inside those texts were revelations that cut deeper than family betrayal. They tied King Harris to choices with chilling, life or death stakes. Decisions that weren't just reckless, but dangerous enough to wipe away his reputation and erase his future forever. And then came the line that turned the courtroom into a graveyard of silence. Boosie's voice cracked as he read it aloud. "If this comes out, they'll bury me alive. And I don't mean in the media." The words hung heavy, like a curse echoing through the walls. People gasped, some covered their mouths, others sat frozen in disbelief. The weight of danger, despair, and doom was undeniable. King Harris wasn't just in trouble, he was in deep. Even T.I., sitting across the courtroom, couldn't hold his mask together anymore. His jaw tightened, his fist clenched, and his eyes locked on his son with a pain so raw it shook the room. For the first time ever, the proud father didn't look like a giant. He looked broken. This wasn't the legacy T.I. had built. This wasn't the future anyone imagined for King Harris. It was a nightmare unraveling in real time. Live in front of cameras, journalists scribbling every word, and millions watching across the globe. Outside the courthouse, reporters were sprinting to push out breaking notifications, while inside the digital world caught fire. Social media went into full-blown meltdown. Your King Harris exposed. Your Earth Boosie leaks. Our dark secret revealed. The hashtags were endless. Twitter was drowning in threads. Instagram lives were popping off, and TikTok edits were already remixing the scandal with dramatic music and flashing headlines. The downfall of King Harris wasn't just trending, it was viral history in the making. But inside that courtroom, this wasn't about hashtags. This was raw, brutal, human devastation. Boosie sat there breathing heavy, staring King Harris dead in the eyes as if to say, "I warned you this day would come." King tried to look away, but he couldn't escape the avalanche of evidence. Every text, every confession, every piece of his hidden double life was laid bare, ripped apart line by line for the world to judge. His empire wasn't just cracking, it was crumbling. And the heartbreak? It was written on the faces of those who loved him most. Tiny buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Family members whispered prayers under the breath, desperate for a miracle that wasn't coming. Even Boosie's fiery rage began to shift, his voice colder now, tinged with something that almost resembled pity. Because in that moment, this wasn't just about winning a case anymore. This was about unveiling a tragedy so deep it would stain the Harris name for generations. The gallery sat frozen, not even daring to breathe, as more texts flashed across the record. These weren't just scandalous. They were heartbreaking confessions of hidden pain, secret breakdowns at 3 a.m., and shady dealings that pointed to betrayal from within his own circle. The courtroom wasn't just watching a scandal. They were watching a legacy burn to ash right before their eyes. This was a darkness nobody ever saw coming from King Harris, and now it was out in the open for the entire world to dissect. There was no escaping it, no denying it, and the weight of it all pressed down like a ton of bricks. By the time the judge finally called for a recess, the damage was done, was irreversible. The world had already seen enough to drag the Harris brand into the dirt. The music, the fame, the power, the royalty of Atlanta. It had all been drowned under the flood of one brutal revelation. King Harris's darkest secret wasn't just exposed. It had been unleashed like a beast, and it wasn't going back in the cage. And while King sat frozen in shame, Boosie strutted out of the courtroom with his phone still in his hand. Cameras flashing in his face like fireworks on the 4th of July. One question lit up every headline, every comment section, every whisper in that courthouse. If these texts were only the beginning, then what monsters were still hiding in the shadows? Because one thing was clear, the story wasn't over. No, it was only just getting started. The second those courtroom doors swung shut, the building erupted like a storm breaking loose. Reporters bolted down the halls, stumbling over each other to be the first to drop the next explosive update. Outside, journalists were screaming into live cameras, while bloggers and Twitter spaces were already dissecting every single line. Meanwhile, inside, King Harris sat slumped low in his chair, like his soul had been sucked out of him. His whole body shook as if the floor beneath him had given way. His lawyers leaned in close, whispering strategies, but it was useless. He wasn't hearing a word. His eyes stayed glued to the table, empty and lifeless. He looked like a ghost, drained, broken, and terrified of what was coming next. Because everyone in that room knew the truth. Boosie wasn't finished. Those texts were just the opening shot, and if a few screenshots could bring King Harris to his knees, then whatever Boosie had lined up next had the power to end him completely. Boosie stormed out of the chamber with fire still blazing in his eyes. He threw his phone up high toward the cameras like a trophy, reporters shoving mics in his face, desperate for the next bombshell. The war had just begun. "You ain't seen nothing yet." Boosie's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, cold, commanding, dripping with vengeance. His tone made the walls shake, every word heavy with the promise of more destruction. The world thinks King Harris is innocent? Nah, these receipts, these messages, they prove he's been playing everybody. And I'm not stopping until the whole truth comes out. Within minutes, the media spun into overdrive. Headlines blared across every phone screen. Boosie drops, bombshell in court, leaked messages, exposed King Harris, T.I.'s son in crisis. The internet didn't just react. It erupted. Live streams pulled in millions of viewers in real time. Fans recorded tearful reaction videos, and haters cheered like they had front row seats to the fall of a dynasty. What had started as a courtroom hearing had transformed into a global spectacle. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, every platform was flooded. The downfall of King Harris wasn't just gossip, it was entertainment. It was tragedy. It was history being written in neon lights across the culture. Inside the recess room, though, it wasn't flashing hashtags, it was devastation. Tiny sobbed uncontrollably, her hands trembling as she whispered desperate prayers under her breath. The woman who had fought to keep her family strong looked shattered beyond repair. Across the room, I was pacing like a lion locked in a cage, fists balled, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. For years, he had gone to war for his son, defending him, building him up, silencing critics. But now even I couldn't protect him. The betrayal was too sharp, the evidence too brutal, the shame too public. But the most chilling part? Those texts weren't just about King Harris himself. Hidden in the messages were hints of something much bigger. Secrets tangled up with other names, other players, other lives, shady dealings, unnamed accomplices, and whispers of a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone had imagined. The implication was terrifying. King wasn't just protecting himself. He was guarding secrets dangerous enough to collapse reputations, wreck families, and maybe even cost lives. The Harris scandal wasn't just personal anymore. It had just blown wide open into something far darker. When recess ended and the judge stepped back into the chamber, the air grew suffocating, so heavy you could almost taste the tension. Reporters jammed the benches shoulder to shoulder, cameras rolling despite the court's desperate attempts to keep them silent. Everyone was waiting, buzzing with one question. What was Boosie going to reveal next? The answer came fast. Boosie's lawyer rose to his feet, clutching another file. Thicker, heavier, more dangerous than the last. He held it high for everyone to see, shaking it with theatrical flair. Your Honor, what we showed earlier? That was only a fraction. What we have here, this is the complete picture. A shiver ran through the room. King Harris's breathing quickened, his chest rising and falling like he was drowning in air he couldn't catch. His eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for escape, but finding none. And then, barely above a whisper, he muttered to himself, "I'm finished." The reading began. Line after line, the texts spilled out, each one more explosive than the last. References to nights of betrayal, strange mentions of money changing hands, cryptic conversations about secrets that could never be traced back. The language was twisted, eerie, enough to make stomachs churn and jaws drop. This wasn't just a kid caught up in reckless mistakes. This wasn't teenage rebellion. This was something darker, something criminal. Gasps rippled through the gallery, some people even crying out in disbelief as the image of King Harris shifted right before their eyes. No longer just a troubled air, he was starting to look like something far more sinister. And then came the final dagger. The last message read aloud in the courtroom, sending chills down spines everywhere. They'll never believe it's me. Not as long as my family keeps protecting me. The words echoed in the chamber like a curse. Heads turned instantly toward T.I. and Tiny as whispers spread like wildfire. Was the Harris family part of the cover-up all along? The courtroom exploded into chaos. Ty shot to his feet, his voice cracking with fury as he roared, "Enough! This has gone too far." His entire body trembled, veins bulging as guards rushed to hold him back. But it was already too late. The words had been read, the damage had been done, and the image of his family, the legacy he had built, lay in ruins. Outside, reporters went wild, replaying the moment in real time with captions screaming across TV screens. T.I. breaks down in court, and King Harris's double life exposed. Twitter was flooded with clips of Tiny collapsing into her chair, sobbing so hard her cries echoed through the courtroom like the soundtrack of a tragedy. The Harris empire wasn't just shaken, it was collapsing in front of millions. And King? He sat motionless, staring down at his hands as if they didn't even belong to him. Tears welled in his eyes, but they never fell. He looked like a man drowning in silence, lost in a storm he created but couldn't escape. The once loud, cocky, brash King Harris, the one fans thought they knew, was gone, In his place sat a broken boy, hollow-eyed and haunted by his own truth. But Boosie wasn't done, not even close. He leaned forward slowly, his stare locked on King with a fire so sharp it cut through the air. His voice came low, but it sliced through the room like a blade. You thought you could play me? You thought you could lie, cheat, and hide behind your daddy's name? Nah, the truth always comes out. And now, the truth just destroyed you. Gasps erupted. Some covered their mouths, others shouted in disbelief. The judge banged his gavel furiously, calling for order, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could stop the chaos from spilling over. This wasn't just a courtroom hearing anymore, it was the public execution of a family's reputation. The Harris family name was bleeding out in front of the world. Their reputation, once untouchable, was collapsing in real time. Fans who used to scream King Harris's name in pure admiration were now screaming in shock, disbelief, and raw betrayal as the court adjourned for the day. Outside, the streets were absolute pandemonium. Cameras swarmed like vultures, protesters roared with fury, and fans broke down sobbing in the middle of the chaos. Some screamed for justice, others begged for mercy, but no matter what side they were on, every single person agreed on one chilling truth: nothing would ever be the same again. And in the heart of that storm, Boosie. He strutted past the flashing cameras, phone still glowing in his hand like a trophy of destruction. His head held high, his expression cold. He didn't need a long speech, just one bone-chilling sentence that sent the crowd gasping, the world frozen in silence. This ain't just the end of King Harris. This is the beginning of something bigger. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Because if what Boosie had already shown was only the beginning, then whatever else he had locked away in that phone could destroy not just King, but an entire empire built on the Harris name. The internet knew it, the media knew it, and the world was watching every second, waiting for the next bombshell to drop. By the next morning, the courthouse had turned into a full-blown war zone. News vans jammed the streets, helicopters circled overhead, and protesters screamed through megaphones at the gates. Some waved signs defending the Harris family, others carried posters demanding justice, but everyone agreed on one undeniable fact. This case wasn't just scandalous. It had already become the most explosive, unforgettable scandal hip-hop had ever seen. And then came the moment. King Harris arrived under heavy guard, cameras firing like gunshots. Every step he took broadcasted across the globe. The young heir who once walked with swagger now walked with shackles of shame, facing a storm that could swallow him whole. King Harris walked in with his hoodie, yanked low over his face, but it didn't matter. The cameras still caught everything: his swollen eyes, his trembling lips, the hollow look of a young man who looked less like a star and more like a prisoner of his own sins. He was being dragged into a battlefield he could no longer escape. Tiny gripped his hand tight, whispering prayers through her sobs, but her tears betrayed her breaking spirit. I marched beside them like a storm waiting to erupt, jaw clenched, every step radiating fury that could barely be contained. Inside, the courtroom was suffocating with tension. The judge sat stone-faced, giving nothing away, while reporters leaned forward in their seats like hungry wolves circling fresh blood. And Boosie? Boosie sat back with that infuriating smirk, his eyes glinting like he already knew the destruction he was about to unleash. Then his lawyer rose, voice booming across the chamber. Yesterday, we exposed the texts. But today, we bring you the voices behind those words. Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves. A single click, and then it began. The courtroom filled with King Harris's own voice, raw, panicked, undeniable. They don't know. Dad can't find out. If the press gets this, it's over. The money, the deals, everything. Gone. I can't stop Boosie. I'm trapped. Gasps tore through the gallery like thunder. Tiny buried her face in both hands, sobbing uncontrollably, her cries echoing through the chamber like a funeral hymn. T.I. shot out of his chair, his whole body trembling with rage, but bailiffs grabbed him, forcing him back down before the eruption could turn violent. And then came the second recording, darker, heavier, King's voice again, but this time slower, heavier, dripping with dread, an admission that froze the entire room to stone. They set me up, but I played along. I had no choice. VH1 was in on it. The producers told me to stay quiet. They wanted the ratings. They wanted the drama. And now it's too big to stop. The words blasted through the courtroom like a grenade. The judge's gavel slammed down again and again, but order was already gone. It didn't matter. The damage was irreversible. The very suggestion that reality TV producers not only knew about King's dark secret, but encouraged it for profit, sent shockwaves through the entire entertainment industry. Social media instantly erupted into digital chaos. Hashtag shot to the top of the charts. Hashtag K confession. Hashtag VH1 exposed. Hashtag Harris Empire burns. Twitter spaces were packed with debates. TikTok feeds overflowed with reaction videos, and YouTube went live with breakdowns before the recess even ended. The scandal wasn't just hip-hop anymore, it was dragging the whole reality TV world down with it. Inside the courtroom, King buried his face in his trembling hands, whispering over and over, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But no apology could erase the nightmare of what had just been unleashed. That's when T.I. snapped. He bolted upright, his voice cracking under the weight of rage and heartbreak. "Y'all trying to destroy my family. This ain't justice. This is a circus." His words thundered across the room, but the cameras outside twisted them instantly into fresh headlines. T.I. loses control in court. The judge demanded silence, banging his gavel furiously, but it was useless. The spectacle had already spun out of control. Every network, every blog, every influencer account was replaying King's voice on a loop. Fans sobbed live on TikTok whispering, "How could King do this?" while others accused the Harris family of staging a cover-up that had finally gone nuclear. And just when it felt like the storm couldn't get any darker, Boosie's lawyer stood again. With a slow, deliberate motion, he pulled out one last weapon from his case, a small USB drive that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The gallery gasped. If the text broke King, if the recordings broke T.I., then whatever was on that USB might burn the entire empire to the ground. Boosie's lawyer locked eyes with the judge, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is the recording that proves everything." A click. Then King's trembling voice filled the room, weak, broken, undeniable. "If this gets out, Dad's empire dies. The Harris name, it's over, and maybe that's what needs to happen." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear hearts breaking. Tiny collapsed to the floor, her screams piercing through the chamber, echoing with the agony of a mother watching her family shatter into dust. I froze, his face hollow, his eyes gone dead. His son, his pride, his heir, his legacy hadn't just confessed. He had admitted that maybe the Harris family deserved to fall. Betrayal at the deepest level, captured on record, captured on camera, captured forever. And the world outside saw it all in real time. Fans lit Harris merchandise on fire during live streams, flames reflected in their tears. Former collaborators scrambled to cut ties, dropping statements overnight. Endorsements vanished like smoke in the wind. Even VH1, the very network tied into the storm, issued a cold, calculated response. "We are reviewing the allegations and recordings with legal counsel." The Harris family wasn't just under attack. They were standing on the brink of total annihilation. By the end of that day, it was chaos in Atlanta. Court security had to escort the Harris family out beneath riot shields. Protesters screamed at the gates, some demanding justice, others sobbing in disbelief, while journalists shoved microphones in their faces, desperate for one final quote from the family that once reigned supreme. I guided a broken Tiny into an armored car. His arm wrapped tight around her as if holding her together was all he had left. Behind them, King followed slowly, his head bowed so low it looked like he was trying to disappear into the ground, drowning in shame, drowning in the weight of the truth he himself had unleashed. And then, the final image that burned itself into history. Boosie stepped onto the courthouse steps, both hands raised high in the air like a general declaring victory. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, the crowd roaring in chaos all around him, and with a smirk that would haunt the Harris name forever, he shouted one single word to the world: the truth!